Starting off this countdown, we have the toy monkey. You may recognize this little demon monkey from the Conjuring universe. It made a little cameo in the movie Annabelle Comes Home. Anyways, apparently this monkey is possessed by a demon that enjoys stalking its victims before murdering them. That is absolutely horrifying. Why isn't this more well known? Now, there is good news to this. Apparently it's no longer haunted. It was blessed by them and now stored safely in their museum. But before it was blessed, they told no one about this demon monkey. Coming in at number 9, we have the other dolls. And if you guys are liking this video so far, smash that like button and subscribe to our channel. So the Warrens have a number of creepy ass dolls that are possessed by demons, not just Annabelle. Let's take a look at some of these terrifying dolls. First up, we got this lovely doll with no mouth. Not gonna lie, it looks like a kid's paper mache craft. But that hair looks a little too real. Let's hope it's not. Then we have this doll. I didn't think we could get any worse, but whew, I was wrong. Okay, her eyes are horrifying. They literally just stole my soul. And last but not least, we got this gem. Because who doesn't love clowns, am I right? All of these dolls are apparently haunted by different demons. But that's all we know about them. The rest is a mystery. Moving on to number 8, we have the succubus demon. Succubus is a demon that is said to take the form of an attractive female in order to trick and seduce men. It's common for men to be visited by this demon in their dreams. While investigating the Smurl family haunting, Ed came in contact with a succubus demon. Both Ed and Lorraine tried to remove this demon from the Smurl family's home, but actually failed to do so. That's when they had to call in Pope Benedict XVI for help. And they performed a ritual exorcism of the house. Maybe that's why we didn't know about this, because the Warrens failed at removing the demon and needed help. That must have been pretty embarrassing. In our 7th spot, we have the haunted house. The Borley Rectory is said to be one of the most haunted places in England. It was built in 1862 but sadly was damaged by a fire in 1939, and by 1944 the whole thing was demolished. Now here's the thing. Before it was demolished, it was said to be extremely haunted. People would hear footsteps and see ghostly apparitions of a nun and a phantom coach. In fact, when Ed and Lorraine Warren visited the church, this is when she encountered the real-life demon that inspired Valak. While there, she also saw a headless demon monk walking around that left cryptic messages on the walls. And also, they saw ghostly nuns walking around at night. That's when the Warrens hired a bunch of photographers to help capture evidence of these demons. They ended up encountering the ghost of a nun or demon nun. She was a real-life woman that got buried alive in the brick walls after having an affair with a monk. So there were multiple ghosts and demons at this church that the Warrens encountered, which were not publicized by them. Fun fact though, the Warrens kept a brick from this demolished church in their museum. Cause why not, you know, memories, a little souvenir. In our 6th spot today, we have the Pearls of Death demon. This simple pearl necklace is said to be one of the most dangerous items in the Warrens museum. And honestly, it's the most beautiful. Doesn't it make you just want to pick it up and put it on? Well, don't, ever. This necklace is incredibly cursed and is said to strangle anyone who wears it. Basically, it all started when a woman was given this necklace. She put it on and claims that it felt like someone was strangling her to death. People around her had to actually yank the necklace off of her to save her. It was a near-death experience. It's believed that this necklace was used in incantations or rituals, or even was used as a holy relic to Satan worshippers. So now it's possessed by some sort of demon that wants to kill anyone who wears it. The Warrens again chose not to go that public with this necklace, because it might tempt people to visit the museum and put it on for themselves. And obviously they don't want people dying at their hands. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Union Cemetery Ghost. Now this one is a bit different than the other ghosts and demons on today's list, and that's because the Warrens kept this ghost a secret because it was fake. There wasn't actually a ghost. Let me explain. So according to a legend, there's a lady in white that haunts Union Cemetery in Easton, Connecticut. She was apparently the victim of betrayal by her lover, and she died either by taking her own life when she was heartbroken, or she was actually killed by her lover. Well, Ed was determined to capture her on tape, and enlisted his secret, not so secret lover, Penny, for help. So in the summer of 1990, Ed apparently camped out in the cemetery for a week trying to make contact with this ghost, and it was a fail. The two then faked a video of the lady in white, which was just Penny wearing white. Anyways, he went on to make great claims that he made contact with this ghost, but hardly any evidence was provided, just a few shadow ghosts on video, which was Penny. People were questioning the authenticity of this video, and he kinda was like, hey, let's just, forget about this, and then they just never talked about it again. Coming in at number 4, we have the Donovan family. In the 70s, the Donovan family was haunted by a very malevolent demon. It started off how it normally does. The family would hear loud noises coming from inside their walls. Eventually, things would happen like blood would pour out from their taps, and they would hear animalistic growls coming from within their house. The Warrens were sent in to investigate, and turns out that the daughter, Patty Donovan, used an Ouija board and was communicating with the spirit that claimed it was a young boy. Clearly, it was a demon in disguise as a young boy. After learning that, the Warrens called for a priest and they exorcised the house from evil. But how come this case wasn't as well known as the others? Why were they trying to keep it a secret? Seems suspicious. What were they hiding? In our third spot, we have the Antonellis. This is another innocent family that was terrorized by evil. It all started back in February of 1966, when the Antonelli family started experiencing some paranormal visitors. Miss Antonelli was the first to see it. She was about to doze off when she got a feeling that someone was in the room with her. She opened her eyes and saw a massive gray mist with 4 distinct appendages. She turned on the light and the figure disappeared. For years, this figure tormented her and no one believed her. That was until it started tormenting her husband, and he was all like, WTF is going on? The house really is haunted. Sorry sweetie, but I believe you now. I don't know if he actually said that, but it probably was something along those lines. Anyways, the Warrens were eventually called in and they conducted a seance. That's when they discovered a number of dark things happened at that house. Some of it was so disturbing that it's believed they wanted to try and keep this case a secret because of the home's gruesome past. Apparently a young girl became pregnant by a neighbor. Her baby was then killed and buried in the cellar. That's just some of the dark things that happened there that the Warrens were willing to share. Moving on at number 2, we have the exorcism gone wrong. In the early 2000s, Ed and Lorraine Warren traveled to Japan to check out these so-called haunted tunnels, where a number of people mysteriously died in. But they got more than they bargained for, because while in Japan, they were called in to do an exorcism on a young girl named Teresa. There was a demon inside of her fighting to take control of her body. In fact, Teresa didn't speak a word of English, but during the exorcism, she spoke fluently. The leaked footage of the exorcism shows Teresa trying to fight back against the demon. But a number of people don't think it went too well. Even if you Google the case, no information comes up. So many fans believe that poor Teresa lost her life to this demon, which is why the Warrens kept this a big secret. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Shadow Doll. I'm gonna start by saying that Annabelle looks like nothing compared to this doll. Seriously, its appearance alone is horrifying. Way creepier than that Raggedy Ann Annabelle doll. Anyways, according to the Warrens, this doll was used in a number of satanic rituals. In fact, the doll itself is composed of human and animal bones and black magic. Then, one of the rituals went wrong, or went right, because the doll became possessed by a demon, and it's super powerful. Rumor has it that if you take a picture of the doll, then it will latch onto you and visit you in your dreams. The dreams will be so bad that you'll either have a heart attack and die, or never want to sleep ever again. In fact, according to the Warrens, this demon doll has been responsible for a number of deaths. So the doll was first for sale in an antique shop, and a couple decided to buy it. I'ma stop myself right there. I don't know what possessed this couple to buy the doll. Probably the demon possessed them and convinced them it was a good idea, because who the hell would look at this thing and be like, huh, that's a great little fun-loving doll, isn't it cute? No! Anyways, the couple began to experience intense and horrifying nightmares. They later found out that they were having identical nightmares, and one night the husband woke up with huge gash marks on his back. They linked this all back to the doll and got rid of it. Now, since this demon is so powerful, the Warrens obviously didn't want to tell people about it, because then the media would go on a frenzy and take photos of it, and then the demon doll would curse all them. So they hid it away in their museum for as long as they could.
Number 10. The Devil Made Me Do It. In 1981, 19-year-old Arn Cheyenne Johnson sparked controversy far and wide for a crime he wasn't behind, or so we think. While arguing with Alan Bono over Johnson's girlfriend, Arn stabbed Bono, resulting in the man's death. When police arrived, Arn claimed that the devil made him do it. When the words "the devil made me do it" came from his mouth, it sent the world into controversy. Apparently, Arn was possessed by a demon that had not been vanquished by the Warrens at all. Ed and Lorraine had worked with his family a year prior when Arn's girlfriend's brother David was possessed by not one, not two, but 43 demons. In order to save him, Arn commanded the demons to enter him instead, so when his dark deed finally occurred, Ed and Lorraine flew to his defense. The Warrens stated that at the time of the exorcism, and I quote, "Johnson leapt up and cried to the demon, 'Come into me, I'll fight you, come into me.' But from that time on, he was possessed." The Paranormal Society was split in half, but Johnson's team was committed. The court had defended acts of God in the past, like a lightning strike to a tree hits a car, you know what I mean? And now it was time to defend accounts of the devil. But despite what you believe, it wasn't enough, and Johnson received a maximum sentence but was released after good behavior just 4 years later. But still, the fact that these demons were never truly vanquished left the Warrens terrified that this might be the case elsewhere. Number 9. The Smurl Haunting. Jack and Janet Smurl sound like they should be like the leading couple of a comedy featuring Jennifer Aniston and Jason Sudeikis. But of course, wrong list. The plight of the couple attracted the attention of Ed and Lorraine Warren after a series of dark and ominous events struck, of course. In the 1970s, the family started experiencing shocking technical mishaps like their TV bursting into flames and toilets flushing by themselves. I know, do ghosts poop? Apparently. At first, they didn't think anything of it, but then the knocking started, in a peculiar pattern of 3 followed by terrible sudden odors, making the Smurls feel ill. The strange noises and smells were swiftly followed by sightings and thus entered the Warrens. The Warrens discovered a presence of 3 separate demons, and despite 3 exorcisms, the family reported the return of the demons until finally they let go 15 years later. Number 8. The Haunting in Connecticut. The mortuary turned home for the Snedeker family in Southington, Connecticut definitely created the perfect breeding grounds for a scary story, one that left even the Warrens uneasy in their skin. First off, moving into a mortuary? No thank you. In the 1980s, the Warrens took on the case of Carmen and Al Snedeker, who were being tormented by a series of restless spirits and demons. So in this case, it's not just one, but many that they feared. The family reported the smell of rotted flesh lingering in the house because, I don't know, it was a mortuary, and that the taps would turn red out of nowhere. The eldest son was plagued by visions of ghosts, and both Carmen and Al reported being sodomized by the ghosts. It's a very specific activity. Which led to the Warrens making the discovery that whoever the morticians were, their activities were not always professional, if you get my drift. I don't know what's worse, the demons themselves or like the people who used to live there. Ugh, can't handle that. This was one of their most confusing cases and remains under scrutiny to this day, but the Warrens knew whatever it was had to be exorcised. But the question is, was it really, or is it just hiding out until someone else comes along? Number 7, the Enfield haunting. I don't know what it is with the 70s, man. It just seems like so much weird stuff happened. We had serial killers. It's nuts. But it just seems like it's one of the strangest times in history, what with violent killers and violent hauntings. The Enfield haunting took place in Brimstown, England, and remains one of the more boggling cases the Warrens worked on. Peggy Hodgson and her family claimed to have seen furniture and toys being thrown and moved by unknown forces in their homes. They even claimed that violent voices were heard and that their children were levitating in the air. They caught the photo of the girls levitating when the investigators set up a wired control camera into the room, which periodically caught images throughout the night. Whatever it was, the Warrens knew there was a demonic entity within the house and immediately set to work. Number 6, the Perrin family case. The Perrin family lived in the old Arnold estate, which inspired the scariest film I have ever seen personally, because if you've watched me on Central Dark, you know how low my tolerance is. But anyway, it's still awful. Yeah, you know it, you've heard of it. 8 generations of families lived and died in the old house and apparently never wanted to leave, or never could. When the Perrin family moved in the 1970s, the advice they got was to leave the lights on always. Why didn't you leave then? I don't know. I don't know how that didn't send them running for the hills. The house had been rife with tragedy, but one of the 3 people who took their own lives was an alleged Satanist whose activity was responsible for the possession of the house. Her name was Bathsheba Bathsheba Sherman, who became a demon that Lorraine will never forget. The demon would physically attack the daughters of the parent family, with one reportedly seeing a floating head screaming and retching at her. Ugh, I almost didn't say her name, but I did, so we'll see what happens to me now. Number 5, the Shadow Doll. The Shadow Doll is literally the doll of your nightmares. The Shadow Doll comes from unknown origins but was kept in the Warrens Museum for safekeeping. But what we do know was that it was used for satanic rituals, and that the thing is doused in black magic and contains human and animal bones. Whatever possesses this thing had the Warrens take it into their possession to ensure that it caused harm to no one else. Legend has it that if you take a picture of the doll, it will possess your nightmares. But it won't just be any nightmare. It will be the most terrifying you've ever experienced, and some have even suffered heart attacks from them. I know what you're thinking. Why didn't they just burn the thing? Well, what's more dangerous? A demon you can see right in front of you, or one free to wander wherever it chooses? Honestly, I take the spider approach with this. If you see the spider, you know where the spider is, you're good. As soon as the spider disappears, burn your house down. Number 4, Valak. This one is a little controversial because was it just made up for the films? We don't know. Valak is a real demon mentioned in the Lesser Key of Solomon that was introduced into the Conjuring series of films. Though her direct involvement with Lorraine and Ed is under debate, Lorraine's belief in the demon was very strong. Valak is referred to as the Great President of Hell, and usually chooses to appear as a small winged, two-headed creature thing resembling a child. Valak is said to command 30 legions of demons, and in the film became the leading arch nemesis of the Warrens. We'll mention Borley Church in a second, but Valak was portrayed as a nun. But there is some speculation that says that they may have actually encountered him throughout some of their worst cases. Lorraine often said that she encountered a black, shadowy vision of a dark entity whenever she wasn't working on a case, and believed that she was being followed by something she couldn't explain. Want to know more? Stay tuned until the end of the video and make sure to like and subscribe while we're here. Number 3, Borley Church relates to Valak. We'll talk about this in a second. The grim history of Borley Church is the perfect setting for a horror film. The land upon which it is built used to be the home to a 14th century monastery, where a monk fell in love with a nun at a nearby convent, which led to the monk being hanged, and the nun was bricked up alive within the walls of her convent, which sounds pretty friggin' extreme if you ask me. It sounds like evil resided there long before Ed and Lorraine made the trek out to sort out whatever demon lay between its walls. Whoever did that to those two poor people, ooh, that's awful. This case inspired the famous nun apparition, as I mentioned, as the youngest daughter of the family who settled there reported seeing her figure. She was also pushed and slapped hard enough to leave welts behind, and that was just in the 1800s. When Ed and Lorraine visited, they obtained photo evidence of the hauntings. Ed captured the image of a monk leafing through one of the books at the altar, and Lorraine experienced a black entity rush past her. Valak. She remembered feeling an overwhelming sense of evil. A picture revealed later showed that the shadow of a nun was rushing past her, so that's where the image came from. So was it Valak? We don't know. Number 2, the Annabelle doll. You knew. Probably the most famous of the hauntings conquered by the Warrens was the Annabelle doll. It would almost be a crime not to mention it. Dolls are already eerie with their black, piercing, beady eyes that look like there's nothing there. But in this case, the most terrifying part was the thing behind it. The case dates back to the 1970s when a Raggedy Ann doll was innocently purchased from an antique store for her daughter. Soon the doll began raising alarm when it would change positions in the house, boggling its owners. But when the notes started showing up saying "help me" and "help Lou," then they came home to find it covered in blood, and they decided then that they needed to call a professional. The first medium they called in said it was just the spirit of a girl who passed away, but then the owner, Angie's boyfriend, was attacked. Enter the Warrens. They knew the doll was in fact a demon based on the marks of the beast and other encounters. They removed the doll and took it home, vowing not to take the highway, concerned that whatever was within the doll might cause an accident. Indeed, their brakes stalled or failed several times on their way home, putting their life in jeopardy several times. It wasn't until Ed doused the doll in holy water that the problem desisted. The couple was so concerned about the doll that Ed routinely said a prayer over the doll every single night. Alright, number 1, the Amityville Horror case. The setting: Amityville, Long Island in 1975. A place rife with satanic manifestations set on driving whoever entered to violent madness. As soon as I even say Amityville, you know where this is going. One of the most famous Warren cases, this haunting continues to land on the conclusion that there are just some things that can't be explained. A year before the Lutzes moved into the suburban home in Long Island, Ronald DeFay Jr. shot and killed the 6 members of his family. So it's no wonder that during the first month of living there, the Lutzes experienced swarms of flies, loud banging noises, disturbing entities, and even levitations. The Lutzes moved out and left all their belongings behind, and George Lutz, the father, an ex-Marine and karate expert, so clearly a tough guy, wouldn't even meet the Warrens at the house. He met them at a Pizza Hut. He was that scared. The Warrens said that this case affected their personal relationship to each other the most out of any case they've worked on. This entity followed the Warrens home the very first day, and Lorraine described being incredibly fearful. There was something she just couldn't explain. To this day, Lorraine says that this is the case that haunts her the most, and said, and I quote, she hoped that this was as close to hell as she would ever get.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the Antonellis. The story of this haunting starts off with Mrs. Antonelli, who, in February of 1966, claimed that while everyone else in the house was sleeping, she saw some sort of apparition. She explains that it was a mass of grey mist that had 4 distinct appendages, and she said it was bright and looked as if it were in sort of a bubble. No one, including her own husband, believed the things she had seen until a year later. It was at this point that one day, while Mr. Antonelli was home alone, he suddenly, out of nowhere, heard a quote ungodly scream, and when he looked in the direction that it came from, he saw the stairs in his house, but suddenly they appeared as if they went on forever. He sat down, he had a few coffees and cigarettes, like I think anyone would after seeing something like that, and after he thought it was over and went back to the housework he was doing, but he certainly was not right. Basically, it said that he put a hammer down about 7 to 10 feet away from the top of the stairs, and then all of a sudden the hammer came flying down them. He went to grab it, put it down again, and this time it suddenly flew right over his shoulder. It is said that when his family came home, he was still ghostly white and this time had 2 cigarettes in his mouth. From here, it is said that many other family members would go on to also experience very strange and unexplainable occurrences. It is said that for the Warrens, even in their long and full careers, this was one of the most interesting cases that they ever investigated. In our number 9 spot today, we have The Devil Made Me Do It. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to like this video, hit that thumbs up button if you're enjoying it so far. This is the Ed and Lorraine Warren story that is behind the 2021 Conjuring movie. In 1981, Arn Johnson was accused of taking the life of his landlord, Alan Bono. Ed and Lorraine had been called to the house prior to this taking place because the family believed that the younger brother of Arn's fiance had been possessed by a demon, but when their paranormal investigations began, Ed and Lorraine claimed that Arn was also possessed by some sort of demon. The trial of Alan's killing ended up marking a point in time, as it was the first time demonic possession was used as a not guilty plea. In this case, it was unsuccessful, but it went on to be one of the most historic cases of Ed and Lorraine's. In our number 8 spot today, we have The Conjuring. Of course, we have to talk about this case because it is the one that really started a lot of our more modern interest in Ed and Lorraine cases. The house, often referred to now as the Conjuring House, was built in 1736, and it wasn't anything special and didn't really gain its fame until the family of Roger and Carolyn Perrone moved in 1971. They claimed to experience terrible things like the smell of rotting flesh, witnessing something levitate in their beds as they slept, and one of the family members even claimed to have been possessed by a spirit. The family, of course, called Ed and Lorraine to come and investigate and hopefully help them out. Once there, the pair claimed that there was in fact a spirit haunting the home, and it was that of Bathsheba Sherman, who is said to have been a witch who previously lived in the house and who was buried in the cemetery nearby. The investigators had to make several trips to the house over the span of a few years, but as of now, it is said that the house belongs to new owners who continue to open their doors to paranormal investigators. In our number 7 spot today, we have Leslie. Leslie was a 19-year-old student who was attending college in Hartford when she encountered the Warrens. Leslie came from quite a well-off New York family, but in the end, she came to the Warrens for help because she was experiencing these unexplainable bouts of depression and anger, and she wanted to see them resolved. She actually, in the beginning, only met with Ed, and when she did, she explained to him that she had previously called upon demons and even the devil himself in order to help help her win the love of a boy back home. Apparently, she had won the boy, and now Satan was on the way to claim her soul, which is why she needed the help of the Warrens before it became too late. In our number 6 spot today, we have Amityville. One of the cases that is perhaps the most famous of Ed and Lorraine's is that of the Amityville haunting. In the 1970s, couple George and Kathy Lutz contacted the paranormal pair because they claimed that their house was haunted by some sort of violent demonic presence. They said that this presence was so intense it forced them to have to leave their home. Considering the dark history this home had just before the couple had moved in, that includes the lives of the family who lived in the house before being taken, it wasn't necessarily a stretch to believe that the house was haunted by some sort of evil spirit. In the end, the Warrens investigated the home and backed up these claims that the Lutzes had, which is part of the reason why this case ended up launching its own multi-million-dollar franchise afterwards. In our number 5 spot today, we have The Vampire. This story is said to be that of a sort of possession, which I honestly wasn't expecting. It is said that the subject in this case, who isn't named, began to have an interest in the occult because of a sort of curiosity with morbidity and death. This then led to her starting to practice satanic rituals, which, listen, we can all express ourselves how we choose, but just be careful, you know, because for this woman, these rituals led to a bloodlust. She soon found herself waiting outside of cemeteries and dark places trying to find a young man to prey upon. She would bite them like what you would expect a vampire to do, but it is said that these bites were only to satisfy her craving and hunger and that the bites were never serious. I'm just saying, serious injury or not, it's pretty messed up. It is said that during her interview with Ed Warren, the woman confessed to having bitten 16 different people in this way. In our number 4 spot today, we have West Point. This story starts off when Ed and Lorraine were called to a military academy in West Point, New York. When the couple arrived, it is said that Lorraine could sense what was going on. She felt the presence of an Irish cook named Molly. She explained that Molly was a bit clumsy and messy, but this wasn't the only presence, however. The officers at the academy would complain about a ghost moving objects around their living quarters. It was later identified as a ghost named Greer, which, after some research, turned out to be quite eerie. This is because it is believed that the ghost might have been that of Lawrence Greer. This man was a Buffalo soldier until it is said that he turned into a killer. Here's the really creepy part though. I mean, as if being a killer isn't creepy enough. It is said that after Greer's trial, there is no record of what happened to him. In our number 3 spot today, we have Union Cemetery. The Union Cemetery in Easton, Connecticut is known as one of the most haunted cemeteries in the United States, which definitely says a lot. The most famous of all of its hauntings is a presence that is referred to as the White Lady. There are many people who have experienced this ghostly presence, and many people have seen her walking in front of their cars as they drive near the cemetery. That is all exactly why, in 1990, the Warrens decided to experience it for themselves when they set up cameras in this haunted location. It is said that just after 2:40 a.m. they heard the sound of weeping, and a paranormal figure began to move several feet in their direction. It is said that as they witnessed this, Ed tried to slowly approach her, but she suddenly vanished just as quickly as she had appeared. In our number 2 spot today, we have the origin story. We talk a lot about the most famous cases of the Warrens, like the ones that inspired the Conjuring movies or Haunting in Connecticut or The Nun, but what we don't really talk about is how the Warrens got into the occult themselves. I mean, most people, especially in their day, don't wake up and suddenly go, I think I'm gonna dedicate my life to the paranormal, so something must have happened to pique their interest, right? Well, apparently for Ed Warren, it started at quite a young age. It is said that Ed realized at only age 5 that his house was haunted. Apparently he witnessed a glowing orb and a terrifying woman's face coming out of his closet. I mean, that would be horrible to see as a grown adult. I can't imagine at that age, but it fully makes sense as to why he later became so interested in the things he did. Before Ed and Lorraine became the names they are today, it is said that in order to help the pair get a foot in the door, literally, into haunted homes, Ed used his passion for painting. He used this by painting homeowners pictures of their houses. Clearly, something he did must have worked. In our number 1 spot today, we have The Haunting in Connecticut. If you've ever seen or read The Haunting in Connecticut, this is a home and a story that might be a little familiar. In 1986, the Snedeker family moved into a new rental home that at one time had previously been a funeral home. In the basement, the family family found some less than welcoming items that were left from the home's previous life. Shortly after moving in, however, their discoveries would become more gruesome as they began to have reports of evil coming from the house. These included attacks on the family members, seeing apparitions, and they even explained violent personality changes from one of the members. When Ed and Lorraine investigated the house, they were able to confirm that it was in fact haunted. It is said that one of the most frightening things that took place in the house, aside from the rumors of possession, was one day when a family member was mopping the floor and all of a sudden the water suddenly turned blood red. Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have The Conjuring. To start off this list today, of course, we have to talk about the case that really started a lot of our more modern interest in Ed and Lorraine cases, and that would be the Conjuring house. The house, which was built in 1736, wasn't anything special and didn't gain its fame until the family of Roger and Carolyn Perrone moved in 1971. They claimed to experience terrible things like the smell of rotting flesh, witnessing something levitate in their beds as they slept, and one of the family members even claimed to have been possessed by a spirit. The family, of course, called Ed and Lorraine to come and investigate and hopefully help them out. Once there, the pair claimed that there was in fact a spirit haunting the home, and it was that of Bathsheba Sherman, who is said to have been a witch who previously lived in the house and who was buried in a cemetery nearby. The investigators had to make several trips to the house over the span of a few years, but as of now it is said that the house belongs to new owners who continue to open their doors to paranormal investigators. In our number 9 spot today, we have Annabelle. Many of us are likely quite familiar with Annabelle due to the movies made about the haunted doll. As it turns out though, they truly are more than just movies, as the real story is said to have taken place in the 1960s. This is at least when Ed and Lorraine began to get involved with the doll. In 1968, two roommates claimed that the Raggedy Ann doll that was gifted to one of them by their mother had become possessed by the spirit of a young girl named Annabelle Higgins. After further investigation by the pair, the Warrens explained that the doll was being manipulated by an inhuman presence, and they knew that the roommates would not be able to keep the doll without fearing for their safety. This is what led to the pair taking the doll and placing it in their occult museum. In our number 8 spot today, we have Amityville. One of the cases that is perhaps the most famous of Ed and Lorraine's is that of the Amityville haunting. In the 1970s, couple George and Kathy Lutz contacted the paranormal pair because they claimed that their house was haunted by some sort of violent demonic presence. They said that this presence was so intense it forced them to have to leave their home. Considering the dark history this home had just before the couple had moved in, it wasn't necessarily a stretch to believe that the house was haunted by some sort of evil spirit. In the end, the Warrens investigated the home and backed up claims that the Lutz had, which is part of the reason why this case ended up launching its own multi-million-dollar franchise afterwards. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Enfield poltergeist. In 1977, the Warrens were called to Enfield, which is said to be a North London suburb, over reports of some poltergeist activity. Many people claimed that the reports of the hauntings were a hoax, but when the Warrens conducted their investigations, they became convinced that the hauntings were a result of demonic possession. The claims said that the house had furniture that moved on its own, there were disembodied voices being heard throughout the halls, and just general haunting things that nobody would want in their home. In the end, this case was so famous, it's actually what went on to inspire the story that was seen in The Conjuring 2. In our number 6 spot today, we have The Devil Made Me Do It. This is the Ed and Lorraine Warren story that is behind the 2021 Conjuring movie. We've got a lot of fucking Conjuring movies on this list. In 1981, Arn Johnson was accused of taking the life of his landlord, Alan Bono. Ed and Lorraine had been called to the house prior to this taking place because the family believed that the younger brother of Arn's fiance had been possessed by a demon, but when the paranormal investigations began, Ed and Lorraine claimed that Arn was also possessed by some sort of demon. The trial of Alan's killing ended up marking a point in time, as it was the first time demonic possession was used as a not guilty plea. In this case, it was unsuccessful, but it went on to be one of the most historic cases of Ed and Lorraine's. In our number 5 spot today, we have the werewolf. Okay, I'll be honest, this is one of the more controversial Ed and Lorraine cases, but still, we had to talk about it. Ed and Lorraine claimed that they were able to exorcise the angry spirit of a werewolf from a man named Bill Ramsey, who is said to have turned into a sort of wolf man. The Warrens did not perform exorcisms themselves, so of course they needed to get some help from priests as well, but they claimed that the treatment worked. Lorraine explained that she saw Ramsey's case on TV and just felt like she could help him. She even claimed to have a video of this guy transforming into the werewolf creature, but conveniently never released it to the public. The Warrens were so involved in this case that they brought Bill from England back to Connecticut in order to be exorcised by a bishop that they knew and trusted. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Union Cemetery. The Union Cemetery in Easton, Connecticut is known as one of the most haunted cemeteries in the United States, which definitely says a lot. The most famous of all of its hauntings is a presence that is often referred to as the White Lady. There are many people who have experienced this ghostly presence, and many people have seen her walking in front of their cars as they drive near the cemetery. That is all exactly why, in 1990, the Warrens decided to experience it for themselves when they set up their cameras in this haunted location. It is said that just after 2:40 a.m. they heard the sound of weeping, and a paranormal figure began to move several feet in their direction. It is said that as they witnessed this, Ed tried to slowly approach her, but she suddenly vanished just as quickly as she had appeared. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Smurl house. In August of 1973, the Smurl family had moved into a new home in West Pittston, Pennsylvania, but things quickly took quite a dark turn. The family began to claim that their new home was possessed by some sort of a demon that caused loud noises and bad odors, and whatever this entity was, it was doing some really violent things to the family, as well as to their pet dog. This went on for years before they decided to call in the pros. Of course, Ed and Lorraine were on the case. According to Ed, there was a demon that inhabited the home, and it was very powerful. It had the ability to shake mirrors and other items of furniture, and they began trying to persuade it to leave by playing religious music and praying. Apparently, the Warrens, while in the home, witnessed a drop in temperature, which was followed by the formation of a sort of dark mass. There was another instance where they claimed they saw the demon leave a message on a mirror that read, "Get out." In our number 2 spot today, we have The Haunting in Connecticut. If you've ever seen or read The Haunting in Connecticut, this is a home and a story that you might be a little familiar with. In 1986, the Snedeker family moved into a new rental home that at one time had previously been a funeral home. In the basement, the family found some less than welcoming items that were left from the home's previous life. Shortly after moving in, however, their discoveries would become more gruesome as they began to have reports of evil coming from the house. These included attacks on the family members, seeing apparitions, and they even explained violent personality changes from one of the family members. When Ed and Lorraine investigated the house, they were able to confirm that it was in fact haunted. It is said that one of the most frightening things that took place in the house, aside from the rumors of possession, was one day when a family member was mopping the floor and all of a sudden the water suddenly turned blood red. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Donovan family. In the early 1970s, the Warrens were called to the home of the Donovan family, and when they arrived, they found them all terrified. They witnessed loud pounding and other inhuman noises coming from inside of the walls. The wallpaper was peeling and the water was running red. The Warrens began their investigation, and this included asking them questions to try and find out if there was a source for the haunting, such as a recently passed away family member or some kind of new secondhand item that they had inherited. Through this questioning, it was revealed that one member of the family had used a Ouija board and ended up contacting someone who said that they had died in the neighborhood 10 years earlier. The Warrens knew it was time for them to call a priest because they believed that the entity that had been reached through the Ouija board was actually a demon that was just posing as the person who had passed away. Following an exorcism, it is said that things in the home slowly returned to normal, but the events stayed with the entire family. One member who witnessed the hauntings and the exorcism said, quote, "I nor anyone else in my family have ever before witnessed anything so weird and terrifying." Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Leslie. Leslie was a 19-year-old student who was attending college in Hartford when she encountered the Warrens. Leslie came from quite a well-off New York family, but in the end she came to the Warrens for help because she was experiencing these unexplainable bouts of depression and anger, and she wanted to see them resolved. She actually, in the beginning, only met with Ed, and when she did, she explained to him that she had previously called upon demons and even the devil himself in order to help her win the love of a boy back home. Apparently, this worked. She had won the boy, and now Satan was on the way to claim her soul, which is why she needed the help of the Warrens before it became too late. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Borley Church. This is the story that is behind the inspiration for the terrifying movie The Nun, so buckle up because it's a good one. This story takes place when the Warrens went to Essex in order to investigate claims of the haunted Borley Church. The tales involved ghostly chanting, organ music being heard when no one can be seen playing, as well as the ghosts of both monks and nuns roaming around the area. It is said that these hauntings started because in one of the past lives of the area and the building, it is said that a nun was buried in the the walls alive after attempting to run off with a monk. I gotta be honest, if that was me, I'd haunt that place forever too. The Warrens are said to have made a series of visits to Borley, and in regards to their very first visit, Lorraine apparently said that it was a phenomenal experience. She spoke about how there was a reporter who was also there to cover the story, and this reporter was particularly skeptic about the reports. Suddenly, this reporter began feeling ill and was struggling to breathe. Later that night, after listening to a tape recording of the event, it is said that a disembodied female voice could be heard repeating the words, "Hit him, hit him." In our number 8 spot today we have the vampire. This story is said to be that of a sort of possession, which I honestly wasn't expecting. It is said that the subject in this case, who isn't named, began to have an interest in the occult because of a sort of curiosity with morbidity and death. This then led to her starting to practice satanic rituals, which, listen, we can all express ourselves how we choose, but just be careful, you know? Because for this woman, these rituals led to a bloodlust. She soon found herself waiting outside of cemeteries and dark places, trying to find a young man to prey upon. She would then bite them, like what you'd expect a vampire to do, but it is said that these bites were only to satisfy her craving and hunger, and that the bites were never serious. I'm just saying, serious injury or not, it's pretty messed up. It is said that during her interview with Ed Warren, the woman confessed to having bitten 16 different people this way. In our number 7 spot today we have Satan's Harvest. This is the story that is said to be behind the book Satan's Harvest, and it involves someone named Maurice Theriault, who is also known by the nickname Frenchie. He was a farmer, and it is said that he had 2 personalities. One was kind and friendly and warm, his neighbors loved him, some members of his family loved him, but there was another side of him that was dark and cruel and twisted, and this was seen towards specific members of his family. Ed and Lorraine came to investigate, and it is said that chaos ensued. They claimed to see him bleeding from his eyes, they found crosses that would just appear on his body, and even messages written on his back. In our number 6 spot today we have West Point. This story starts out when Ed and Lorraine were called to a military academy in West Point, New York. When the couple arrived, it is said that Lorraine could sense what was going on. She felt the presence of an Irish cook named Molly. She explained that Molly was a bit clumsy and messy, but this wasn't the only presence, however. The officers at the academy would complain about a ghost moving objects around their living quarters. It was later identified as a ghost named Greer, which after some research turned out to be quite eerie. This is because it is believed that this ghost might have been that of Lawrence Greer. This man was a Buffalo soldier until it is said that he turned into a killer. Here's the really creepy part though. I mean, as if being a killer isn't creepy enough. It is said that after Greer's trial, there's no record of what happened to him. In our number 5 spot today we have the Ouija board. This story is one that Ed Warren told when he was trying to set an example of how things of the occult and the supernatural certainly are not for amateurs or for the faint of heart. He used this story of a girl who was playing with a Ouija board. You know, how all good supernatural stories start. She asked for proof of a spirit presence, and she got a lot more than she bargained for. Warren said, quote, "She got this proof with 2 days and 2 nights of hell." Apparently it started off with a manifestation of a sort of animal form walking on her bed. This then turned physical, and whatever this entity was left her with bruises. It is said that thankfully the mother in the home saw what was happening and she took action. She not only prayed by the girl's bedside, but she also sprinkled holy water. There was a 2-day vigil in which everyone tried to rid the girl of this demonic presence that she had summoned, and thankfully, it worked. In our number 4 spot today we have The Beginning. We talk a lot about the most famous cases of the Warrens, like the ones that inspired the Conjuring movies or Haunting in Connecticut or The Nun, but what we don't really talk about is how the Warrens got into the occult. I mean, most people, especially in their day, don't just wake up and suddenly go, I think I'm gonna dedicate my life to the paranormal. So something must have happened to pique their interest. Well, apparently for Ed Warren, it started at quite a young age. It is said that Ed realized at only age 5 that his house was haunted. Apparently he witnessed a glowing orb and a terrifying woman's face coming out of his closet. I mean, that would be horrible to see as a grown adult, I can't imagine at that age. But it fully makes sense as to why he later became so interested in the things that he did. Before Ed and Lorraine became the names that they are today, it is said that in order to help the pair get a foot in the door, literally into haunted homes, Ed used his passion for painting. He used this by painting homeowners' pictures of their houses. Clearly, something he did must have worked. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Lindley Street haunting. This is a case that the Warrens were involved in back in the 70s. A couple named Gerald and Laura Goodwin had adopted a girl named Marcia a few years prior to this case and the strange occurrences taking place. There were a bunch of weird things that started happening, including furniture moving, seemingly of its own accord, as well as a crucifix flying off the wall, again seemingly by some sort of invisible force. What really drew people into this case specifically, and what made it so sensational, was the number of people who had reputations of being reliable who also claimed to witness these strange occurrences. It is said that some people claimed to even hear Marcia's pet cat speak. One reverend even claimed to see the cat singing Christmas carols in the basement. But let's be honest, while that would be very jarring, that's also one of the funniest things I've ever heard. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Antonellis. The story of this haunting starts off with Mrs. Antonelli, who in February of 1966 claimed that while everyone else in the house was sleeping, she saw some sort of apparition. She explains that it was a mass of grey mist that had 4 distinct appendages, and she said it was bright and looked as if it was in sort of a bubble. No one, including her own husband, believed the things she had seen until a year later. It was at this point that one day, while Mr. Antonelli was home alone, he suddenly, out of nowhere, heard a quote ungodly scream, and when he looked in the direction that it came from, he saw the stairs in his house, but suddenly they appeared as if they went on forever. He sat down, had a few coffees and cigarettes, like I think anyone would after seeing something like that, and after he thought it was over and he went back to the housework that he was doing, but he certainly was not right. Basically, it said that he put the hammer down about 7 to 10 feet away from the top of the stairs, and then all of a sudden the hammer came flying down them. He went to grab it, put it down again, and this time it suddenly flew right over his shoulder. It is said that when his family came home, he was still a ghostly white, and this time he had 2 cigarettes in his mouth. From here, it is said that many other family members would go on to also experience very strange and unexplainable occurrences. It is said that for the Warrens, even in their long and full careers, this was one of the most interesting cases that they ever investigated. In our number 1 spot today, we have the theater haunting. Starting in Willimantic, Connecticut, the Warrens went out to check out a theater that was said to have a number of strange apparitions and weird sightings. The manager is said to have been 32 at the time, and he had also recently started working there when he saw the figure of a woman late one night after he had already closed down the theater. He saw the same figure the following night, and this led him to confide in one of the employees who had been there for years about what he was witnessing. This is when the employee said that from the balcony one night he had seen 2 actors in a Shakespearean dress. One of them fell exclaiming, "They've killed me," and then all 3 of them disappeared. This wasn't the only employee either. The janitor also experienced strange happenings and sometimes even heard footsteps. The Warrens decided to conduct a seance in the theater. Ed apparently reported that, quote, "The girl whom the manager had seen came to us and explained she had been murdered after she witnessed the killing of a man. The spirit said she knew she was dead, but she was afraid to, quote, pass over to death because, quote, they were waiting for her." There was of course a medium present at the seance, and it is said that this medium called upon spirit guides to help the girl, but she refused. The Warrens left this case saying that the girl's spirit was still earthbound and that she remained in that theater. I wonder if she's still there. Does anyone know?
Starting us off with number 10 is the Perron family haunting. Why do all family hauntings start with them moving to a new house? I feel like that's the starting point of every horror film I've ever seen. But anyway, this case revolves around Roger and Carolyn Perron, who moved with their 5 daughters to a new home in Harrisville, Rhode Island. However, what they didn't know before moving in were the horrible things that took place in the house before they moved. 8 generations of the same family lived and died in that house, and the worst spirit there was called Bathsheba Sherman, who lived there with her 4 kids, 3 of which died in that house. These deaths caused a lot of suspicion to circulate around Sherman, and she was labeled a Satanist. She eventually hung herself in her backyard and began haunting the families that lived in the house. She wasn't all bad. I mean, she helped them with their chores, and she even played with their children. But the family also saw furniture moving on its own, they heard disembodied voices at different times of the day, and saw full ghost appearances. Sherman hated hated Carolyn as she was the mother and wife Sherman always wanted to be, and thus she used to slap and pinch Carolyn quite a bit. She even used to touch Roger inappropriately. Imagine a jealous female ghost. I mean, jealous females that are alive are bad enough, let alone a dead one. When they brought in Ed and Lorraine in 1974, that actually provoked Sherman even more, so that the Perrons actually just asked the Warrens to leave. Has anyone seen The Conjuring? Well, that's also based off this family. Little tidbit of information for you. Coming at number 9 is Annabelle. Just like the 2014 Conjuring spin-off, which I saw and was a bit spooked by, I'm not gonna lie. So the real story takes place in the year 1970 when a mum bought her daughter a Raggedy Ann doll from an antique store. Daughter put the doll in her bed and left her there. But soon enough, the doll started changing position, and initially they thought it was because the bed was being nudged or whatever the hell, but they soon changed their minds. The doll made itself even more at home, changing rooms even, and leaving notes around the house which read "Help Lou" and "Help me." They lived in a home with other people, and the doll even strangled one of the housemates' fiancés in bed. The last straw was when they came home one night to discover the doll covered in blood. Whose blood? I have no clue. Let's just not think about it or talk about it. The duo called an expert who told them the spirit of the doll was called Annabelle, and she was a 7-year-old girl that was murdered years beforehand and was just left to rot in a field where the apartment now was. I want to say apartment, but it's probably like a very old house sort of thing. The spirit told the expert medium it wanted to stay and be loved by the family, so the housemates just let it be, not knowing that there was no little girl at all, and it was in fact a demon with behavioral problems. They called on the Warrens to investigate, and they concluded the doll was possessed by a demonic presence. Well, yeah, no shit. They performed a blessing at the house and then took the doll from them, and it's still in their occult museum to this day. At number 8, we have the Smurl haunting. This one centers around Janet and Jack Smurl and is also the basis of a film and some books, all titled The Haunted. Very appropriate. For 13 years, the Smurls experienced a series of hauntings. Strange markings would appear on their walls, television burst into flames, the spirits actually threw their dog into a wall, pushed one of their daughters down the stairs, their toilets flushed by themselves. I mean, I didn't even know ghosts poop, but that's good to know. And they even sexually assaulted Jack many times. When the Warrens were eventually called, they found 3 different demonic entities living in the house, and so they called a priest to perform an exorcism. While that was going on, Ed said he felt that the temperature drop in the house instantly and saw a dark mass appear just randomly. The entities even wrote "Get Out" on a mirror for the Warrens, and he apparently has a lot of audio tapes of the knocking sounds made by the demons. The American Society of Psychical Research said the whole case was a fad, but what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Filling that number 7 slot is the trial of Aunt Cheyenne Johnson. Now, this was the first case in America to use the devil made me do it defense in a murder trial. Back in 1981, Johnson went for dinner with his fiancée Debbie and their landlord Alan Bono, amongst others. All of a sudden, Johnson started stabbing Bono with a pocket knife, and he ultimately died. In his trial, Johnson pleaded not guilty because he claimed he was possessed when the murder took place, incited his connection with Debbie's brother David, and called the Warrens to the trial to testify. A year prior to the murder, David started seeing demons that looked a bit like the Thing from Insidious. There was no explanation at all for the bruises and scratches all over his body. Johnson and Debbie got a priest, but this only angered the spirit even more and made David speak in multiple voices and hiss. He said he felt like he was being choked by something, and he had red marks on his neck even though no one was touching him. They called the Warrens, who dispelled the demons from the boy's body, but then they actually went into Ann's body instead. After teaming up with the Diocese of Bridgeport and some priests, they got rid of 40 demons in David's body. The court still found Ann guilty of first-degree manslaughter, and he was in jail, but I think he's released now. Now at number 6 is the Union Cemetery case. If it's a cemetery, you may as well assume it's haunted before you even go there. The cemetery is located in Connecticut and is said to be one of the most haunted cemeteries in the US. It is home to the White Lady, who is said to be a ghostly apparition that used to rise out of the gravestones and hover around. And obviously White Lady because she wears either a wedding dress or a white nightgown. Many identify her to be the ghost of Harriet R. Seeley, who died in 1853. They say she haunts the cemetery looking for her son, who she lost during childbirth 1 week before her death. Some people visiting the cemetery found this gravestone and reported it being the only one in the whole cemetery that was knocked over out of the ground. Ed and Lorraine visited the graveyard, and according to Ed, he captured a picture or video of the actual ghost, which many have disputed. disputed. The Warrens even wrote a book including this case called Graveyard: True Hauntings from an Old New England Cemetery. Is this a hoax? Is it not? I don't know how they captured it on video. I actually haven't seen the video, but if you guys have, let me know if it's real or not. Coming at number 5 is a haunting in Connecticut. There's a lot of controversy around this one about whether the events were true, false, or simply very overly exaggerated, but they were still credible enough to be immortalized in the film The Haunting in Connecticut. In 1986, Al and Carmen Snedeker moved a house to be closer to the hospital that was treating their son. See, I told you it's always when people move house when something goes wrong. The house was formerly a funeral home with a graveyard outside and a mortuary in the basement. Honestly, with those factors, they should have just almost expected getting haunted. Seriously. The couple reported seeing their dishes moving on their own, water turning blood red, lights flickering as always in every horror story, the smell of decaying flesh, and seeing the dead. They even claimed the spirits sodomized them. When they called in the Warrens, they found out that the spirits were angry because the morticians used to have sex with their dead bodies. What else can go wrong in this house? After 2 years, the couple finally moved out, and people still question if all of it is true till this day. At number 4 is the Borley Church haunting, and people say that this case is behind the movie The Nun, which is another extension of the Conjuring world. Did that franchise literally just turn every one of the Warrens' cases into a horror film? I mean, are they getting paid for this, at least royalties? If the next one is based on any of the cases I mentioned today, then mark my words, I called that. But anyway, the Warrens and some photographers visited Borley Church, located in southern England in the 1970s. They heard about a series of strange occurrences like a headless monk leaving cryptic messages on the walls, bells ringing for no reason, organ music playing by itself which is creepy as hell, and even a dead nun walking around the premises at night. This is giving me goosebumps just thinking about it and talking about it. They ended up finding the ghost of a nun who was buried alive in the brick walls of the church because she was having an affair with one of the monks. That's a harsh punishment. They apparently caught the ghost of this nun praying on their camera. I didn't even watch the movie The Nun because Valak's face was scary enough. I don't need to sit through an hour and a half of jump scares with her face in it. Filling in our number 3 slot is the demonic werewolf. This case took place in Essex and centers around Bill Ramsey. Now, by the age of 9, Bill was already showing demonically possessed werewolf tendencies, whatever those look like. He used to try and bite his family before having seizures, and he was also endowed with impossible superhuman strength to the point he managed to rip out a post right from its concrete dwellings. At the age of 9, that is a feat. After this, he grew up, got married, had a few kids, and nothing was out of the ordinary until he started having nightmares and waking up to the panting of an animal, which he soon realized was actually coming from himself. He even admitted himself into an institution after he started craving blood, showing symptoms of rage like baring his teeth, curling his hands into claws, growling and barking, etc. And while he was there, he even attacked one of the nurses, as if more things couldn't go wrong for this guy. Years later, he also attacked a police officer with a force no one had ever seen before, and it took 6 more officers to hold him down. The Warrens were called after Bill told people to lock him up for his protection and the protection of others. Good guy, Bill. They called on priests to exorcise Bill, and he's been fine ever since. Now at number 2 is the Enfield haunting. This case took place back in 1977 in Brimsdown, England, and it revolves around the Hodgson family, and it also is the basis of The Conjuring 2. Told you, all the films, these cases. It started by Peggy Hodgson claiming her kids kept seeing furniture moving by itself and their toys being thrown about their room. Janet, her daughter, saw her dresser literally slide across the ground on her floor. They started hearing knocking coming from all over the house, especially from rooms that were empty. When the family finally called the police, the officers saw it for themselves. They witnessed chairs moving by themselves and lights flickering on and off. Legos were thrown around the room and were hot to the touch. Coins would drop out of nowhere, they'd hear barking when they didn't even have a dog, and their clothes used to be flung off of tabletops. The worst incident was when the iron fireplace was ripped out of the wall. Iron ripped out of the wall, people. A lot of people didn't believe them, but when the Warrens showed up, they felt a demonic presence instantly. However, unlike the movie, they never performed an exorcism or anything like that. 2 years later, the hauntings mysteriously just stopped, and thank God. I don't even know how they still continued living in that area. I would move house straight away. And finally, at number 1 is the Amityville case, also known as the American Murder House. And this is at our final spot because it's probably their most famous case ever, and it's also the basis basis of the franchise of movies called the Amityville Horror. So this case is about the Lutz family who lived in Amityville, Long Island for a total of 28 days. I mean, hence the name of the case. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. A year prior to the Lutz moving there, it was home to the DeFeo family. In November 1974, one early morning, 23-year-old Ronald DeFeo Jr., who was one of the children, went around his house from room to room and shot both his parents to death and then killed 4 of his siblings as well. He claimed he kept on hearing voices in the house telling him to murder his siblings and his parents. So during the Lutz's time in the house, they experienced a series of horrific paranormal sights. They heard voices, they heard their doors banging, knives being thrown off the kitchen counters. George Lutz even apparently saw his wife levitating above their bed, and he was woken up every day at 3:15 a.m., the same time Ronald went on his killing rampage. They even claimed to see a red-eyed thing that looked like a pig and slime coming out of their walls. When Ed and Lorraine were invited into the house, they brought a TV crew with them and ended up getting a picture of a boy with glowing eyes. 28 days? I would have been out there in 10 minutes.